They plunder, they butcher, they ravish, they make it desert and call it peace. They make it desert and they call it peace. The financial crisis that started in 2008, which then triggered fiscal crises across many of the world's countries. And if that was not enough, a social crisis characterized by rising inequality with the consequences thereto, be it substance abuse, mental health challenges, homelessness, or human trafficking. Then there was a global pandemic, lasting 2 to 3 years and taking the lives of millions of people. And for those surviving, they had restricted movement and restricted choices. All of this, my friends, has been exacerbated by the spreading of fake news. This distorts reality and threatens the stability of our societies, creating a platform for hate to thrive and prejudice to rise. But deeper than all of these crises is a bigger, more insidious crisis that is undermining our domestic and global institutions that have promoted order, peace, and prosperity. It is, my friends, the crisis of truth. Excellencies, when we lose shared truth, our communities, our countries, our global society loses their center of gravity. At first, the damage may seem quiet. Words bend and facts drift in the service of political point scoring. But slowly, over time, we descend into political tribalism. We develop alternative realities and we are unable to understand each other and communicate with each other because we lack a center. Then we grow suspicious of each other. In the absence of truth, trust deteriorates. And we see it all around us. Us in our global rules, governance structures. It all seems, in the words of Chinua Achebe, to be falling apart. When we lack truth and we lack trust, law becomes theater, news becomes spectacle, and science becomes just another opinion. As I've had cause to say in this great hall on a few times, our world today worryingly resembles the world of 100 years ago. And this has become even more evident with the closing of our borders to both goods and to people. This has magnified the geopolitical tensions which had already taken root. Disturbingly, war regrettably has only entered the daily lexicon of the West, not when thousands were dying on the continent of Africa or in Myanmar, but when war came to Europe. Nevertheless, we still call for peace in the Ukraine. Only yesterday, a leading British newspaper reminded us that for 500 days, 260,000 people, virtually the population of my country, 260,000 people have been trapped in the Sudanese city of El Fasher. The article reported that while political progress stalls, those who attempt to escape are killed, and those who remain inside are starved. The world must not ignore the horror in Sudan. And of course, I don't need to remind you that it must not ignore the horror in Gaza. The genocidal destruction taking place in both places must now have our full attention. And as it relates to Gaza, yes, there must be a release of the hostages taken on October 7th. But we have now gone to a point where all of our human sensibilities are offended by the continuous and disproportionate attacks on the Palestinian people and the failure to allow access by the international community to the survivors for the provision of humanitarian aid. The survivors are entitled, my friends, to use the words of Bob Marley. How can you be sitting there telling me that you care, when every time I look around, the people suffer in the suffering in every way, in everywhere? My friends, it calls to mind the Roman historian Tacitus, who quoted a Scottish chieftain fighting against the military might of the Roman Empire. And I mention only the last two sentences. They plunder, they butcher, they ravish, they make it desert and call it peace. They make it desert and they call it peace. The real tragedy of war is that these children, when they become grandparents, will still be answering the innocent questions posed by their grandchildren 70, 80 years from now as to how they lost their limbs. Granny, how did you lose your leg? And when they answer, we run the risk that the violence and hate will be perpetuated for another 2 to 3 generations. This is not why we have come together. This is not good. And Madam President, it is happening under our watch. We can and we must do better to secure the peace across the world in the name of the children. And let me say that at the very least, the international community must immediately find the funding to support the children of Gaza and the children of Sudan for the next 3 months. UNICEF has said that in Gaza it is $66 million that is needed for the next 3 months. And in Sudan it is $200 million. The money is mostly nutrition related, to reverse or to mitigate famine for children, and to provide water and sanitation and health interventions. And we should note that there have been multiple disease outbreaks, including cholera. So, Madam President, to be very clear as I move on, a lasting peace can never be achieved through violence, not continued bombing. It can only be achieved through justice as our guide and dialogue, talking. And lest we forget, where others are seeking to build the peace and to preserve humanity in Gaza, as we saw, the international community must not condone the bombing of those states who look to facilitate peace. It is a red line that we must never cross. Madam President, I say simply again, another year, the world needs a reset. We must find first and foremost whether we still agree on the same values that inform our charter. As simple as this seems, this is necessary in any reset, for values we all know have changed over the last 80 years, and we cannot assume that it is business as usual. And if it is not available to all of us to agree to those values, then we must at least know who does and who doesn't. In addition to our inability to bring about peace in multiple conflicts, there really still are a number of issues that threaten our way of life and the stability of our planet. Beyond this promise poses unregulated, significant risk. Many of our people ask every day, why has the United Nations not done better recently? The simple truth, my friends, is that countries have lacked the political will to live by the Charter and to do what is right for humanity. Countries of different sizes, capacities, and cultures can only survive in this world in which we live if we maintain a rules-based system. It is no different to what we have to do in our own countries to maintain and protect the vulnerable and the weak. In fact, it's no different than what has to be done in a child's playground. The rules-based system is what protects us from bullying and from rogue behavior. Our charter was designed to promote compassion, equality, fairness,